to read between the lines. Got to read.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we are very thankful you take the time from your busy day to view our program. My friends, we're going to get into some topics today that are hitting home, literally. But before we do that, there's a couple of things that are in the background that I would like to discuss with you and bring some information to you. You might have seen this, not on the mainstream media, but you might have seen this if you don't get your information from the mainstream media. That Bayer, we all know that Bayer bought Monsanto. Now Bayer, B-A-Y-E-R, the German company, the same company that made the Zyklon gas. Anyway, I won't get into all that right now, but Bayer bought Monsanto. And I found it interesting that they would buy Monsanto while there was a class action lawsuit against Monsanto because of the use of glyphosate. So anyway, this came to a conclusion this past week, and Bayer, because of the Monsanto purchase, had to pay out over $10 billion to settle thousands of glyphosate lawsuits. $10 billion. Ironically enough, this glyphosate is used in a product called Roundup. It's highly toxic, highly cancerous, and people are spraying it all over the place, all over the country. As a matter of fact, I was in a local hardware store just yesterday, and there it was right on the shelf, Roundup, still being used by Americans, even though the courts have proven, doctors have proven, history has proven, there is documentation to prove that this is a highly toxic, highly cancerous product, all being leached into our water table. Okay, some interesting things going on with regards to the economy. Almost 1/3 of Americans did not make their housing payments in the month of May. Did you hear what I just said to you? Over 1/3 of Americans did not make their housing payments in the month of May. Now that could be rent, that could be mortgages, whichever. They did not make them. Okay, let's get into something that I found very interesting, and the topic was right online. This is from a Bloomingdale, Georgia mayor. His name is Ben Rosier. And he was absolutely lambasted for putting this out on social media. But he writes, again, Mayor Ben Rosier from Bloomingdale, Georgia. He writes, "What is privilege? Privilege is wearing $200 sneakers when you never had a job. Privilege is wearing $300 Beats headphones while living on public assistance. Privilege is having a smartphone with a data plan which you receive no bill for. Privilege is living in public subsidized housing where you don't have a water bill, where rising property taxes and rents and energy costs have absolutely no effect on the amount of food you can put on your table. Privilege is the ability to go march against and protest against anything that triggers you without worry about calling out of work and the consequences that accompany such behavior. Privilege is having as many children as you want, regardless of your employment status, and be able to send them off to daycare or school, which you do not pay for. Privilege is sending your kids to school early for the before school programs and breakfast, and then keeping them there for the after school program and supper, all at no cost to you, paid for by the people who do have to deal with rising taxes and cost. You know, us called privileged, the ones pay while you take, take. Couldn't say it better myself. Bloomingdale, Georgia Mayor Ben Rosier, you hit it right on the head. Really, really incredible. Folks, with all this stuff that's going on, we're going to get into this a little bit more. These agent provocateurs, these nihilists. I want to tell you the main statue thereafter. Yeah, they've already torn down one, or actually many of Washington and Jefferson. They've torn down all these different, even the in Massachusetts, I believe it was in Boston, I think it was on the Freedom Trail, but don't hold that to me, of the statue that was dedicated to the black Union soldiers during the Civil War. They even tore that down. But there is one statue that hasn't been torn down in the South, and you would think it would be. Albert Pike. Albert Pike's statue has not been torn down. Now, they tore down a statue of George Washington in Seattle, and they replaced it with a statue that they bought in Czechoslovakia. And that statue was shipped over here. That statue, my friends, is a statue of Vladimir Lenin. Let us continue. Okay. Speaking of Albert Pike, we have done shows and we've talked to you many times about Albert Pike's letter to Giuseppe Mazzini that was back in 1871 and how they were going to format the three world wars. And the language is incredible. They even use terms like Nazis for World War II and so forth. And we have read this to you many times. But I thought it was a good time to review a small portion of Albert Pike's letter to Mazzini from 1871 with regarding to what's going on today socially in the country. So Albert Pike's, and if you wish to read the whole thing again, my friends, I invite you to go on the internet and just punch in Albert Pike's Three World Wars letter. It'll come up, and it's a letter between him and Giuseppe Mazzini. Giuseppe Mazzini was in charge of the Mason houses in Europe, and Albert Pike, the Mason houses here in North America. So, I'm going to start right in the middle of this three-paragraph that he lays out the three world wars. I am talking about the paragraph regarding the Third World War right now. This is Albert Pike. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided, because let me back up. Before this, he's talking about how they're going to create mayhem in the Middle East between Israel and the surrounding nations. And he gets into a fine detail. Now, mind you, at that point, Israel did not even exist. Understand this. It was through the Balfour Declaration that Israel came into play after World War I. That's why the United States did not allow any Jewish people to come into the United States, even though what was going on in Germany and Poland. Okay? Because they needed the population of the Jewish people to go back to Israel because they knew this was going on, that they knew this was going to be part of the plan, they knew it was going to be orchestrated so they can have the future culmination crisis, as Albert Pike calls it. So I'll give you a little bit of background. When he's talking about the other nations, he's talking about nations, particularly in Western civilization, outside of Israel and the Middle East, okay? Europe, North America. Meanwhile, the other nations, Europe and North America, once more divided, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilist and the atheist. Okay. So, first of all, we, the globalists, the bankers, are in control of these organizations. We know this. We know that Black Lives Matter is financed by a white guy named George Soros. We know that Antifa, this is their third part to play in history. The first one was the Bolshevik Revolution. But now they are in this country. They are also financed and controlled by the same George Soros. This is why now, folks, Black Lives Matter which is just ironic that it takes its funding from a white guy. And as a matter of fact, if you go on the internet, I was going to play it today, but I wanted to do some more talking today. But one of the three ladies that actually now are in charge of Black Lives Matter, they actually talk about, in an interview that was released 2 weeks ago, she actually says that we are trained, her words, not mine, trained Marxist. Same thing that went on with the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. And it just goes on. So we shall unleash. In other words, they got them on a tight chain. Well, now we shall unleash them out to society. We will unleash the nihilist and the atheist. Well, what is a nihilist? A nihilist, my friends, is one who destroys to create void. And this is the reason why you're hearing this whole thing about defunding the police. They don't want to get rid of the police, my friends. When you study history and you have things like the Bolshevik Revolution, you wind up with things like the Soviet Cheka, the East German Stasi, the German Gestapo during the Third Reich. Well, the three entities that I just mentioned, they all have some things in common. One, they were financed, all of them, by the international bankers. Two, their purpose was to streamline and centralize the police forces of the particular nations that I just mentioned. You see, in our country, the only constitutional law enforcement there is the sheriff's departments. All the rest of them do not belong in the states. Understand that. And the reason why is because all of our law enforcement was to be what? Elected by the people. So what they've done here, we have police just walking off the job, leaving. We've had over 100 police murdered in the last 2 months. You don't hear a word of it on the mainstream media. You hear about George Floyd, who, by the way, and when you look at his death certificate, guess what he died from? You guessed it. I'm proud of you. COVID-19. That's right. He didn't die from asphyxiation. He didn't die from hemorrhaging. He died from COVID-19. So these nihilists that have been unleashed by the international bankers are doing exactly what they are to do. Create chaos. And they're destroying all of these statues. And it doesn't matter. Hell, they've even torn down one of Martin Luther King. The black and white thing is just a guise. It's an elaborate ruse. What they're after is to destroy any symbology of history so they can rewrite the history. And with this chaos and violence comes fear. Now we have that Hegelian dialectic, crisis, reaction, solution. And what is the solution? The solution, my friends, is going to be, which is what their goal is to begin with, is to centralize the authoritarian police. Instead of having regional, localized, state police, they're going to have a one central command. And this is what they're going to do. They're going to form a Cheka. They're going to form a Stasi. They're going to form a Gestapo. And they're going to do this, my friends, by demoralizing up our law enforcement agencies. And folks, look what's happened with crime. We read it to you a couple of weeks ago. Crime is up, rape, killings, all of it. Larceny, all of it. It's up by over 300% across the board in these blue cities. They don't want to get rid of the police. They want to centralize into one central authority the police forces in this country. That is what they're after. So Pike continues, we shall unleash the nihilist, they have done it, and the atheist. And the atheist. Atheists they're amoral, they have no morals. They have no guide. You know, even if you're not a Christian, when you read the Ten Commandments, you understand it's a good base of society. Atheists do not have that foundation. They do not have that road to travel on about what's black and white, right and wrong. To them, everything is gray. And the end always warrants the means. It doesn't matter that they're going to tear apart cities, rape and pillage and murder. It's the end game that qualifies and warrants their means. They will not give quarter to their enemies because they do not have a foundation of morality to guide them in their actions. So the nihilist and the atheist are a very, very dangerous and disruptive combination. And they all have been unleashed by the international bankers. And that's what we're seeing today. We shall unleash the nihilist and the atheist, and we shall provoke a formidable social catechism. What is a catechism? It is something that is completely disruptive to what is normal. It's violence. It produces fear. Formidable social catechism, which in all its horror, we will show clearly to the nations of the world the effect of absolute atheism, the origin of savagery and of the most bloody turmoil. That's what we're on our way to. That's what we're on our way to. And I'm going to tell you the ultimate goal that they're after. And I don't make predictions on this show. I'm talking about destroying history. You want to know what statue representation their goal really is? Yeah, they're going to get rid of Washington. They're going to get rid of Jefferson. They're going to get rid of the tribute to the black soldiers of the Union. They're going to get rid of Martin Luther King. But I want to tell you their goal. Their main objective is to get rid of all the statues of Jesus Christ. That is their goal. To get rid of any symbology or representation of Jesus Christ. And they can't say that he was a slave owner. They can't say that about Martin Luther King. Of course, they don't tell you that the two nations that lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, Marines, and sailors and spent untold fortunes to end slavery, there was only two. England and the United States are the only two nations that sent their sons to fight for the end of slavery. And now you've got former Vice President nominee Kane coming out and saying in a public speech that the United States invented slavery. This guy was going to be the vice president. He hooked on with Crooked Hillary. Rewriting history. And of course, what's taught in academia today, they go right along with it because they don't know history. Folks, you see all these kids, what's going on today? You know what I want you to do? I want you to go up to a teacher. I want you to go up to a professor. I want you to go up to a counselor that's in the public school system and thank them. Thank them for the turmoil in our country because they're the ones responsible for it. They take their paychecks, they get their retirement plans, they belong to one of the strongest unions in the world that you can't fire them from their job. But they're the ones who have indoctrinated through 3 generations of the feds being in control of the criteria of our school system. Think of that. So you thank your teachers. Thank you for bringing out these dead-brain kids that can't count change, that have no historical bearing, that don't believe in God. Thank them. They've been very, very successful at destroying the youth of our country. And we are seeing the fruition of their labors for decades on the streets of America today. So thank them. Job well done. You're destroying our nation. Exactly what you accepted your paycheck for. Common Core math doesn't work. Everyone knows that. They don't teach history. Thank them. And by the way, how are your property taxes in support of this indoctrination system? So this is where we are right now. The bankers have released the nihilist and the atheist. And they are going to destroy anything that's symbolic of real history. Doesn't matter the black and white thing. That's just an elaborate ruse. But the one thereafter, like I just said, their ultimate goal is to destroy every statue in this nation that represents Jesus Christ. Let us continue. I want to talk about slavery a little bit. And everyone thinks just the blacks are enslaved. Let me tell you something, folks. Throughout the history of man, in all cultures, in all races, in all geographical areas of the world, there was slavery. The Native Americans that everybody think they were just such peaceful people, they didn't wage war on each other, had slaves from other tribes. Native Americans used to steal people from their enemies, from other tribes, and use them as slaves. And at times sold them to the French. The Hebrews were enslaved for hundreds of years. Then I started thinking about this. I'm a former jarhead. I'm a former Marine. And, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, the shores of Tripoli, my friend, was in Libya. And what they are singing to in the Marine Corps hymn is that when President Thomas Jefferson, because what was going on with the blacks taking all the whites and selling them on slave blocks, that's right, you heard me correctly, that Jefferson sent the Navy and the Marines into Tripoli off the Barbary coast to stop the practice. It was some brutal combat that went on. They were successful, but it was brutal combat. This is why the jarheads, folks, Marines are called jarheads from that era. And the reason why is because if you were 5'8" or more, because the portals in ships at that days were made for people 5'6". So if you were 5'8", you would jar or potentially hit your head walking through the portal. Hence the term jarhead, because you had to bend down, otherwise you would hit your head. The term leatherneck came from the very thick and rigid collars that Marines wore going ship to ship against the Muslim hordes that were slave traders to protect them from slashes to the throat. Hence the word leathernecks. So the Marine Corps has a lot of history in fighting slavery. Black on white slavery. Now, I want to just read to you And of course, now you got Cain coming out and saying the United States invented slavery. Completely wrong. Slavery has gone on. That's why we are a fallen world. Because one of the reasons why, because we enslave each other. But listen to this. There's a book out by Robert Davis. He's a professor of history at Ohio State University. And European Christians were enslaved by Muslims in North Africa between 1530 and 1780. That's 250 years. And in this book, he gets into some real details about what took place with the black on white slavery. Now, you've never heard about this, have you? Now, according to his book and research, there was over 1.25 million European Christians that were captured and forced into slavery from the 16th to 18th centuries. He writes, enslavement was a very real possibility for anyone who traveled in the Mediterranean or who lived along the shores in places like Italy, France, Spain, and Portugal, and even as far north as England and Iceland. Pirates, now these pirates were called corsairs, Corsairs, traveled from cities along the Barbary coast of North Africa, such as Tunisia and Algiers, and they would raid ships in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, as well as seaside villages to capture men, women, and children to be sold into slavery. France, England, and Spain each lost thousands of ships, and long stretches of Spanish and Italian coast were abandoned because of the black on white slave trade that took place. This, my friends, is when Jefferson sends the Navy and the Marine Corps into North Africa, and the whole thing about the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Halls of Montezuma is Mexico, the shores of Tripoli, Libya. And because Jefferson had paid a ransom to the black Muslims for them to stop raiding American ships and American people, well, they took the bribe money and continued the practice anyway. Jefferson, at that point, did not give quarter when he sent the Marines into North Africa. Their orders were to eliminate the problem. And the Marines and the Navy did just that. So, who successfully fought ending slavery? It was the white race, my friends. England and the United States are the only two countries that fought to free other people in other lands against slavery. You won't see that in your public fool system, will you? Okay. I'm going to end there for the sake of time, my friends. I was going to go on to a little bit more about this practice of slavery. I'll sum it up with one more thing. Do you know that today, there are 4 countries that openly practice slavery in the world? 4 of them. And they are all in Africa. They are all controlled by blacks. And they all practice black on black and black on white slavery. Goes on today. And one of them countries is Sudan, the country where Ilhan Omar is from, and all she does is degradate our nation. Enough of that. Let us continue. Okay, so old Mr. Fauci says that you stinking Americans, you have no respect for authority or science. Well, Mr. Fauci, the profiteer, the pimp of profiteering crisis. And what do I mean by that? We've gone over it with you. This man has made hundreds of millions of dollars through the Bill Gates Foundation and other foundations selling and patenting drugs and crises. Why he is still in position that he is beyond me. But the pseudoscience hoax was being put to the limelight. So they had to change the narrative, and they did it with violence. And that's what they're doing. But, you know, we were told that the virus would kill millions in the United States alone. Fauci did. Turned out to be false. We were told that the lockdowns would make it go away, or in the beginning, bend the curve. Turned out to be false. We were told that we would only be confined until the rate of new cases leveled off. Turned out to be false. We were told that while the outbreak lasted, no state government would tolerate any sort of public gathering for any reason. And that was actually true until it came time to rape and pillage 22 blue cities in the United States. Then social distancing and wearing masks and all that just mysteriously went away. Turned out to be false. We were told not to question the authority. The authorities not only lied constantly, but they changed their findings constantly. Turned out to be false. So the CARES Act. I decided, you know what, I'm going to do a little bit of research on this CARES Act. And the CARES Act is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. CARES. So since then, Trump has fired 5 inspector generals in 6 weeks, in a 6-week period. So I'm asking myself, boy, is he cleaning this up? Or is he covering this up? I don't know yet. I'm going to tell you why. Last week, Barr, the ousted U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. What is a district? This is how the lawyers have played with the language. This is how the feds are in the states, because every state is now a district. The federal government can only be involved, according to the Constitution, for the United States. Can only be involved in enclaves, territories, and districts. This is what they're wordsmith. These attorneys are wordsmith. You know, attorn, to separate one from one's property. Attorney. So Trump has fired 5 inspector generals in the last 6-week period. Last week, Barr ousted U.S. Attorney for Southern District of New York, which, by the way, is where the Federal Reserve resides, Jeffrey Berman, and replaced him with Jay Clayton, who heads the Securities and Exchange Commission. Clayton represented, listen to this, 8 of the 10 largest Wall Street banks in the last 3 years before going to the SEC as a partner at Sullivan and Cromwell. One of the biggest law firms in the country covering and defending financial criminals. This gentleman has no criminal investigating expertise. That is very concerning. Now, the CARES Act, $454 billion to be made available in low-interest loans to eligible businesses. Ooh, this is their own writing now. Eligible businesses, states, or municipalities. The Federal Reserve weekly balance sheet data release, known as the H.4.1, shows a line item titled Treasury Contributions to Credit Facilities. Now listen to this. The commercial paper, and so I wrote all this down. This is from the Fed Reserve itself, their site. Commercial Paper Funding Facility, LLC, got $10 billion. Corporate Credit Facilities, LLC, $37.5 billion. Main Street Facilities, LLC, $37.5 billion. Municipal Liquidity Facility, LLC, $17.5 billion. Vitalf, LLC, $10 billion. And the Money Market Mutual Fund Liquidity Facility got $1.5 billion. But what got my attention is I'm like, man, this is really this is everything that's listed at the Federal Reserve site. So I'm saying to myself, man, come on, D'Ambra, that don't come close to adding up to $454 billion. And it doesn't. So I did the math. Folks, according to the Federal Reserve's own report, we have a missing $340 billion. I'll say it again. According to the Federal Reserve's own ledger for the CARES Act, we are missing $340 billion. Now, I do this, folks, because we don't have dollars anymore. We have Federal Reserve notes, which we are the co-surety to the interest bond due on every one of them. So I started reading more about this CARES Act, and I found some very interesting things. Section 4009 of the CARES Act, listen to this, suspends all FOIA requests for the Fed and allows it to conduct its meetings in secret until the executive branch says the coronavirus national emergency is over. So let me see if I got this right. We're the co-surety to the credit being placed out into the system. We're the co-surety to the interest bond due on each one of them Federal Reserve notes that are placed out into the system. We have a shortcoming of reporting from the Fed itself of 340 billion Federal Reserve notes that, again, we are the co-surety to. And Section 4009 of the CARES Act suspends us having the ability to file for FOIAs, Freedom of Information Acts, and the Fed is allowed to conduct its meetings in secrets with no public record. That sounds like one hell of a scam to me. Many of these facilities have been supported by the funding from the CARES Act. Now, this is their writing. We will be disclosing on a monthly basis names and details of the participants in each such facility, amounts borrowed and interest rates charged, and overall cost, revenues, and fees for each facility. We embrace our responsibility to the American people to be transparent as possible. And we appreciate that the need for transparency is heightened when we are called upon to use our emergency powers of the facilities designated as emergency lending facilities under Section 13, Subchapter 3 of the Federal Reserve Act. Does this sound? No FOIA request? Secret meetings? No public records? And like transparency to you? Doesn't sound like it to me. It sounds like the same old rigmarole that's been going on since 1913 when the private Federal Reserve took over the issuance of our currency here in our nation. There are 11 programs listed, my friends. And only 3 of the 11, or 27% of the total, have provided the actual transaction data showing specific funding to specific recipients. Also, loans to various Wall Street mega banks. Oh, here we go. Now we're starting to tread the water, aren't we? Also, loans to various Wall Street megabanks. These loans are ongoing and are currently being made. This is their writing, not mine. Listen to this. The Wall Street mega banks, these loans are ongoing and currently being made at an interest rate, are you ready for this? At 0.1%. How's that sound to you? Pretty good deal, isn't it? If you're the Wall Street mega banks. The interest rate, folks, is 0.1%. Since September, the Fed has made more than $9 trillion in such loans. Now, it has not released in detail information on who has received or how much each specific Wall Street firm has received. Also, there is no disclosure on the discount window loans to Wall Street companies. That usually is public knowledge. What is the disclosure on the discount window loans to Wall Street companies? No longer available to the public. So why has President Trump eliminated 6 of these IGs? I don't know. Is he digging for truth? Putting some people in who will come to the base of it and expose it for what it is? I'm hoping. I really am hoping. Okay, I'm running out of time. I was going to get into Operation Lockstep again, so I'm just going to read this real quick to you. This is from Operation Lockstep. And if you want to look up the whole document, my friends, it's called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. Now listen to the stated goal of this document, Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. This is their writing, not mine. You ready for this? The stated goal of creating a world of tighter top-to-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. That is their stated mission goal. Their writing, not mine. All on a facade, on a hoax. Operation Lockstep, a world in which highly coordinated and successful strategies emerge for addressing both urgent and entrenched worldwide issues. An economically unstable and shock-prone world in which governments weakened, criminals thrive, and dangerous innovations emerge. An economically depressed world in which individuals and communities develop localized makeshift solutions to a growing set of problems. Do you remember that document we read to you, the technical research manual? What was it? Tango Whiskey, Sierra Whiskey, -7905.1. We read that to you. We did, I think, 12 shows on that. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars from 1954. I think we did 3 or 4 shows on that over the years. What were they always talking about, folks? What was the constant denominator of both of them documents? One from 54, one from 79. Shocking the world's population with crises. That Hegelian dialectic again, crisis, reaction, solution. That's what this hoax is all about. By the way, COVID-19 deaths and percentages in nursing homes. The United States, 42% of all these recorded deaths. And don't forget, George Floyd, all the people were murdered, people with cancer, people with heart attacks, they all died from COVID-19. 42% nursing homes, USA. European Union, 50% nursing homes. Canada, 81% nursing homes. Sweden, 90% nursing homes. Spain, 42% nursing homes. Now listen to this. of the mechanical ventilators that they put people on who didn't need it? Guess what the death rate was for the mechanical ventilators that they got $59,000 per person that they put on? The death rate, my friends, was 97.2%. That's murder. Okay, I'm stopping there for the sake of time because I want to get into the domestic Operation Gladio. And for the sake of time, I'm going to read my notes to you pretty much verbatim. Operation Gladio is a code name for a clandestine NATO stay-behind operation in Europe. Stay-behind operation. That's what's going on right now. We have an Operation Domestic Gladio going on in our country right now. And the stay-behind operation is the deep state that is still entrenched in the government. And there's thousands of them. Okay? Its purpose was to continue anti-communist actions in the event of a Soviet invasion or conquest. Now that sounds okay, doesn't it? Well, they're anti-communist. Folks, we funded the communists. We funded Lenin. We funded Mao. We funded Hitler, who was a National Socialist. We funded Pol Pot. We funded them all. General George Marshall wrote about it proudly in his journals. We funded the communists. Create chaos, create strife. Ordo ab chaos, order from chaos. Let me continue. Okay, Gladio specifically refers to in the Italian branch of the NATO stay-behind organizations. It is said to use as an umbrella name for all stay-behind organizations. So Operation Gladio was an umbrella name like MK Ultra for the 143 mind control programs that the government had in this country and still has today. Okay? So it's not just one operation, it's an umbrella name, Gladio. Gladio, by the way, folks, refers to the gladius, a type of Roman short sword. The CIA, in sponsoring Gladio, fomented relationships with right-wing terrorist organizations and perpetrated terrorist attacks throughout Western Europe. Now, folks, these years, which went on from about 1968 till about 1983, that's right, the government was fomenting riots throughout Western Europe that whole span of time. Well, that span of time became to be known as the years of lead. Years of lead. And the lead, my friends, are the bang-bangs, the bullets. Okay? The strategy, this is what they called it, the strategy of tension is a concept, now this is their wording, the strategy of tension is a concept for control and manipulation of the public opinion through the use of fear, propaganda, agent provocateurs, and terrorism. Their words, I got this from the Gladio document. Let me read it again to you. The strategy of tension is a concept for control and manipulation of public opinion through the use of fear, propaganda, agent provocateurs, and terrorism. The aim is to install fear into the populace while framing communist and left-wing political opponents for terrorist atrocities. Through documentation, resolutions, confessions, and convictions, and conviction programs have confirmed this. Known Gladio operations, and I don't have the time, I got 3.5 pages of operations that we know they've carried out through court findings. But I'm just going to read a couple of them real quick to you here. In August 2nd of 1980, there was the Bologna train station bombing, which killed, I remember this, folks. I was overseas as a Marine when this happened. The media placed the blame on the Red Brigades, which was a communist political front group in Italy at the time. Eventually, right-wing and fascist elements were discovered to be the culprits. Really? What'd the court do? What'd the court find out? 2 Italian Secret Service agents and Lucio Gello, head of the infamous PZ Masonic Lodge, were convicted in connection with the bombing. So it wasn't the Red Brigade, my friends. It was the CIA bombing civilians in Bologna at that time. 1969, the Piazza Fontana massacre in Milan killed 16 and maims over 80. former head of the Italian counterintelligence agency, and I don't want to butcher his name, I apologize, Gladio Malati, stated, evidence will provide proof that this massacre had been carried out by the Italian stay-behind army and right-wing terrorists on the orders of the United States Secret Service, CIA, in order to discredit Italian communists. His words, not mine. 1985 in Belgium, secret army attacks and shoots shoppers in supermarkets randomly in the Brabant County, killing 38 and wounding many. Investigators linked the attacks to a Belgian stay-behind group known as the SDRA-8. That's SDRA-8, the Belgium right-wing group WNP, and the Pentagon, funded and operated by the Pentagon Secret Service, DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, part of the Central Intelligence Agency in the United States. Okay, folks, I'm going to stop here. I can go. I've got, like I said, more and more sheets on all these bombings and murders that the United States, the CIA, because the CIA, my friends, is the banker's private army. Okay? And it's not supposed to operate domestically. It operates domestically and throughout the world. And their main thing is to create fear. That Hegelian dialectic, my friends, I see it used every day. You get a triangle in your head. You create a crisis. You get the emotional response you want from the people. And as Johann Hegel said, fear is the biggest motivator. And if you can put anger in that recipe also, that's the best. Fear and anger is the best to get the people to mold where you want them to mold. So you create a crisis, you get the emotional response you want from the people, and you provide the solution, which was your goal the whole time by creating the crisis, and the people will welcome the solution because of the fear factor and the anger factor that you placed into the people by creating the crisis in the first place. I see it every single day. And now you are seeing it here domestically in the United States from what Albert Pike described in 1871 with his letter to Giuseppe Mazzini, that we will unleash, let go of the control that they're holding these people back because they fund the organizations, they logistically support the... Hey, look at Seattle. Look at Chaz, or now they call it CHOP. Right, look at it. They're getting dumpsters, they're getting food, they're getting... the porta-johns, they're getting everything sent to them. They built a wall around CHOP or Chaz. And like I said last week, at least we finally built a wall somewhere in this bloody country. Somewhere. We finally built a wall. It's around CHOP. It's around Chaz. But hey, that's a beginning. We got a wall started. And who paid for that wall? Who paid for everything? The wall was put there by a Department of Transportation of the state of Washington. The Washington taxpayers paid for it. And I'm sure George Soros and Bill Gates and all the rest of them are logistically supplying the rest of it, just like the Gates Foundation supplying all the pallets of bricks that were laid throughout the 22 cities that are rioting here in the United States. But son of a gun, the FBI just can't seem to figure out who placed them pallets of bricks here. No invoices, no communications, just can't figure it out. The whole thing is corrupted, my friends. You better prepare, you better wake up, and you better prepare some more, because this is just the beginning. It's going to get a lot more interesting between here and November, I assure you. Now, Governor Newsom in California signed off on mandatory masks. Governor Abbott of Texas signed off on mandatory masks. And I'm certain Turncoat Scott, I listened to his speech, he's about science, is going to be mandatory masking the people here in this country, even though the masks do not work, the particles are too small, and there's a reason why we exhale, my friends. And we are all going to be experiencing detrimental health effects. We're going to be into an acidic blood system, which brings on more disease like cancer. Cancer cannot survive in an alkaline system. When you cannot exhale carbon dioxide, you go acidic. I don't have the time to get into all that. My friends, I want to thank you for watching our program. We always close in asking you to seek truth, to obtain knowledge, and to manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility. We thank you for watching.
Got to read between the lines. Got to read.